KC Joyner joins us now from the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. KC, Merry Christmas Eve. How you doing over there?
Doing very well. Yourself?
Doing pretty good. So let's start with the Eagles' win yesterday. I think a lot of people have a lot of different reactions, but the one question that we've been asking a lot today is, what is the biggest difference between what you've seen from the Eagles offense these last 2 weeks versus what we saw from Carson Wentz for about 11 games this season?
It's really easy. Nick Foles, yesterday, for Week 16 through yesterday's games, not including tonight, he leads the league in Week 16 in vertical yards per attempt. That's yards per attempt on passes that travel 11 or more yards downfield. Over the past 2 weeks, he's second league behind only Russell Wilson. He's behind by like 0.2 of a yard. So he's hitting on vertical passes. He's hitting on downfield throws in a way that Wentz, by the way, Wentz did not have terrible numbers in vertical passing over the course of, when he was in the lineup, but he didn't reach the heights that Foles has been reaching. So Foles is finding a way to get downfield in ways that Wentz didn't.
Now, is that a byproduct of the player himself? Like, is it that Foles is just a better deep ball passer than Wentz? Or is part of it also play calling?
I think part of it's play calling. I also think that it's just a matter of Foles deciding he wants to go downfield on throws and taking more chances. It's funny. Foles a few years ago led the league in a metric I have called bad decision rate. It measures how often the quarterback makes a mental error that leads to a turnover opportunity for the opposing team. So it shows that he really protected the ball. And I think sometimes he probably got to protect the ball too much. When a quarterback does that, a lot of times his coaches will tell him, we want you to be safe. We don't want you to be that safe. You need to be more vertically oriented than this. So I'm thinking that might have been the case for him, that he decided, okay, I need to balance how often I take chances downfield versus how often, when I take a chance and when I don't. And I think he's, at least in the last couple of games, he said, hey, our offense needs to be vertical. I will bet that the coaching staff told him we're not getting the verticality that we wanted. You need to find a way to do it. And it says something yesterday, by the way. On vertical passes. He's 8 of 11 on vertical passes yesterday, 72% completion rate. He completes 2 out of 4 to Aguilar, 2 out of 3 to Jeffrey, 2 out of 2 to Ertz, 1 out of 1 to Sproles, and 1 out of 1 to Goddard. So it wasn't just like the week before most of his vertical passes were to Jeffrey. He was spreading the ball around on vertical passes, and that's really impressive.
So do you think that this offense functions better with Foles and Peterson with his play calling for Foles, or is it just possible that we've seen what we've seen from other quarterbacks, that when you come back from a serious injury like Wentz came back from, you're just still too rusty to really maximize your ability?
I think that was part of it, too. I wrote about it in an article. Another thing is I wrote about an article in today's for ESPN that I do for looking back at the previous day's games and looking at blocking and how it impacted fantasy performance. When you look at the Eagles' pass blocking yesterday, they only allowed the pass pressure rate. I think that Foles was only pressured on one of his vertical passes, like 9% of his passes. So it's 1 out of his 11 passes. Did you see any kind of pass rush pressure? That's a really impressive number. That was like second, tied for third in the league. There's 2 teams that had 0% rate, but they only threw a few passes. For the amount of passes that he threw yesterday, you could argue that the Eagles gave him the best pass blocking on vertical passes, and that versus a very good Houston defensive line that is getting a very good pass pressure rate over the course of the season and in recent weeks. So it says something that I think he's also getting better pass blocking, which is something that the Eagles struggle with in the middle of the season. And that may be if you're Wentz coming back from injury and they're not giving you good pass blocking, it makes you doubly concerned for how you're going to perform because you're thinking you might get hit and get hurt again.
Casey, kind of to piggyback off of that, Lane Johnson, from me watching the game yesterday, played very well, especially against J.J. Watt. Could you kind of explain how that matchup unfolded throughout the game?
I think that I would totally agree with you there. That I think the Eagles, I think they don't want to put their tackles into situations where they're doing too obvious pass calls, where they're not wanting to say, we're going to have you drop back. Even if it's 3rd and 12 and you're dropping back and you get J.J. Watt pass rushing, good luck. He's probably going to beat you on a couple of plays. And I think that I don't have the metrics on it, but it's been right in front of me. But when I was doing research for the game, my recollection is that when they were deep passing, it was only a number of them were in situations where they weren't in obvious passing situations. I think that was a big part of it too. And again, I think that And a lot of it has to do with that your quarterback has to be able to trust the blocking, and he has to be able to get rid of the ball in a timely fashion. And I think Wentz was getting into the habit of holding on to the football for a bit too long. And Foles just says, if it's time to get the ball out of there, it gets the ball out of there, or I'm going to check it down, or I'm going to throw it away. I'm going to do something. I'm not just going to wander with the football, which I think Wentz got into a bit of a bad habit of.
Casey, it's been an inconsistent season for the Eagles offense. One of the most consistent people this season has been the production of Zach Ertz. And whether you're someone who has him on your fantasy team or you're an Eagles fan, you know that Ertz has had a superb season. He broke the all-time record in a single season for catches for a tight end. What has made Zach Ertz so good this season?
It's usually with tight ends, if you see a tight end getting 100 targets, never mind 100 reception, it used to be the gold standard. If you got 100 targets, you could say that was a workhorse tight end, somebody who was going to probably not lead the league and lead tight ends in receptions. It's going to come pretty close. And now we're getting to a point where tight ends are being utilized in such a way that we're getting even larger numbers out of them. But I think what it is I always say this about running backs, that one of the most valuable things of running backs is a running back who can give you the type of production on carry number 1 and have equal production when he gets to carry number 300, that you're not seeing his productivity level drop off. The Eagles are finding ways to get their tight ends into situations where maybe because they don't get the same sort of hits over down the middle of the field that you used to get back in the day when the safeties could just unload on tight ends. Now they can't do that without incurring a penalty. So I think that's helping tight ends stay healthier. And I think it's just a matter of also the offense is looking at ways to integrate tight ends into the game, because they're seeing matchups and they're seeing setups of things in a way that they can get to those opportunities. But when you can get as many targets as Ertz has this year, I think it's like 140 targets. It's a huge number. When you're getting that many targets in a season for a tight end, it's setting a new standard for what tight ends can do.
One more question on the offense for you. Flip it to the defense. So today the Eagles have activated Mike Wallace off of the IR. So it looks like for Week 17, they're going to get their big deep threat receiver back. How do you think that changes or balances out the offense?
If he can run fast, that's all I want him to do if I'm Peterson. If he can run fast, if he can just threaten the defense with tearing the top off of defense, because you got a quarterback this week, again, 8 of 11, for 72% completion rate of vertical passes. He averaged 23.4 yards per vertical pass, did Nick Foles in this contest. If you've got a quarterback who can put up that kind of number, who can put up those sorts of numbers on vertical passes, and then you add just the threat of going Mike Wallace deep, I think it scares the heck out of a defense. And if I'm them, I'm saying, Mike, I don't need you to be out there for whatever, all 60, 70 plays. I may need you out there only for 20 or 30 plays, but I'm going to have you run deep on almost all of them. I want you to scare this defense so they have to think about covering. If you're open, we'll throw it to you, but if not, just scare the defense, because it'll get these guys even more open to vertical passes, and I would think it would spike the vertical numbers even higher.
KC Joyner joining us on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Talking about the Eagles game last night, also do our whip around of the NFL. But before we get to the rest of the NFL, Casey, the defense got the job done in the end, despite the fact that Deshaun Watson had a very good game, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. So what did the defense do to limit the rest of the players around Watson?
I'll tell you one thing they did. We talk frequently on the show about how the Eagles' defensive front seven tends to dominate in run blocking or in running game, and how they've got a very high, good blocking rate allowed. One number that stood out from this contest, though, is actually the yards per carry before first defensive contact. It's a way of measuring how far upfield an offense is getting before a defensive goes over and hits them. Yesterday, the Texans, if you take out Watson's scramble plays, because he was getting 2 yards in scramble, if you take out his scramble plays and just say, okay, on planned rushing attempts, how good were the Texans yesterday? They averaged 0.62 yards per carry before first defensive contact, dead last in Week 16. It shows that the Eagles' front seven just dominated in the running game, and that's part of the reason that the Texans couldn't get anything done on the ground. Never mind the injury they had; doesn't matter. They weren't getting good enough block and get anybody good carries.
When you look at the Eagles' defense, Avonte Maddox, Rasul Douglas, they got a broken down secondary with a lot of young players. Is that a secondary that you think can hold up for a playoff game or two if the Eagles make the postseason? Or do you think in the playoffs that the Eagles' secondary is something that teams can easily take advantage of?
I think the Eagles need to be of 2 mindsets when it comes to their secondary. Play shell coverages like you did against the Rams. Let people get things underneath and make sure that your guys that you have in there, make sure they can tackle. Because even if they can't cover deep, if you sit back far enough, the offense won't be able to get downfield. Your pass rush can get in there, and then you can come up and tackle on the short passes. That's one thing they need to do. I would also like to see, though, the Eagles try to get more interceptions. They didn't get anything on vertical passes yesterday. You're wanting to make it to where, because Watson yesterday was 11 of 17 in vertical passes. He gained 11.9 yards per attempt. That's a good number. It's probably above average number. It's not a great number. If you're giving up that much on defense and vertical yards per attempt, you're going to be okay. So it's a couple weeks in a row now the Eagles have been able to stop vertical passing games. If they can keep that number in place, that's good. I'd really love to see them start doing a little more ball hawking. I don't know if there's ways that their defense can tell the defensive backs, or the coordinator can tell the defensive backs opportunities when you need to go for interceptions or try and bait the offense into certain looks to make a quarterback want to throw passes in the coverage. That's the other thing I want from them. Just get an interception or two, so even if they are getting vertical passes and that vertical yards per attempt goes up, if you get a pick or two, that offsets a lot of that.
Of course, Casey will join us on Friday to preview the Eagles versus Redskins game. That'll be this Sunday here on 97.3 ESPN, part of the slate of 4 o'clock games, Casey. All the major playoff games are all at the same time next Sunday. But first, let's look back on this past weekend of NFL. Let's first start with that Redskins team. They lost to the Titans. The Titans, though, Marcus Mariota got the stinger. Jarrell Casey was just put on the IR today. So you have a Titans team, yeah, they beat the Redskins, but they're limping into that nighttime matchup with the Colts next Sunday night.
They are, and they're a formula team. There's certain types of games that they can win. Washington's offense, the banked-up offensive line, didn't present enough of a challenge to the Titans to take them out of the type of game they can play. So the Titans can play the type of game they want to play. They're okay. You make them switch to Plan B, then it's a whole different story. I think the Colts will make them switch to Plan B.
My partner, Deshaun Hendricks' favorite player, Lamar Jackson, was part of the charge that got the Ravens the win over the Chargers in Los Angeles. But to me, the big key, the Ravens' defense was one of the only teams this year that shut down the Chargers. Casey, how did they do it?
It's funny because their pass pressure rate coming into that game had been number one in the league in the previous 5 weeks. They only got pass pressure rate on Rivers 28.8% of the time. It's about the middle of the league in Week 16. So it was a lot of just not giving up big plays. And we're doing it all with the pass rush. Their secondary plays where they've got maybe the best of the safeties in the league, or we're pretty darn close. And they've got 3 good cornerbacks. In fact, that's the thing. Their entire secondary, I rate the secondary players in red, yellow, green. Red is a really good player. Yellow is okay. Green is bad. All their players are either red or yellow. At this time of year, usually secondaries are banged up. Their secondary isn't banged up. It's a big plus for them.
And Casey, one more thing to piggyback off of that, their corners do what a lot of NFL corners don't do. They turn around and actually play the football.
Yes, it seems the cornerbacks today, given the pass interference rules, which we'll talk about when it comes to the Pittsburgh game, given the pass interference rules, they're afraid to go out there, and that's, you got to give Harbaugh and the staff credit and say, go be aggressive. If you get a penalty, you're going to get a penalty now and again, but go up there and be aggressive. Kind of what I was mentioning with the Eagles, that you just need to be more aggressive and say, fine, take a penalty or two, but if you get a pick or two to offset that, it's more than even a proposition.
We will get to the Steelers a little bit, but first let's start with the early Sunday games. Cowboys win the NFC East, second time in the last 3 years. They beat the Buccaneers game. The score looks a little closer than the actual game was, though, Casey, because that Buccaneers team for most of that game just looked outmatched.
They did. Their defense is actually playing better of late, but their vertical passing game is nowhere near as good. In fact, it's the second highest pass pressure rate allowed last week. Their pass blocking has been just not very good, and you can't do that against the Cowboys. And the Cowboys, they're showing, though, they can run the ball to win. They can hit big passes to Cooper to win. They can play defense to win. They've got multiple paths to victory. 2 years ago, they kind of had one path to victory. Now it looks like they've got a couple paths to victory, and it makes a big difference for them.
Vikings manhandled the Lions 27-9 on Sunday, a game that was extremely one-sided. And now the Vikings, they got to win next week, and they're in the postseason. Do you think this Vikings team is capable of doing this one more week?
They are, because especially because their run blocking is much better of late. About the mid-season point of the year, they were among the worst teams in the league in good blocking rate. They were just atrocious at run blocking. Now, over the past 5-6 weeks, they've been near the top of the league in run blocking. It's making a huge difference because now you can use the Dalvin Cook, you can use Latavius Murray, and they can be the type of offense they want to be. Because, hey, Zimmer did not want them to be a pass-first team. He wanted them to be a run-heavy team because he knew late in the year that's the kind of formula that was going to win for them. So I like where the Vikings are now versus where they were earlier in the year, even when they had a better record at times.
Falcons beat a Panthers team with no Cam Newton, started the game with Heineke, ended the game with Allen. The Panthers' offense outside of Christian McCaffrey is just a mess. Meanwhile, the Falcons just kind of look like they're trying to redeem themselves at the end of 2018.
Yeah, and the Falcons, it sounds like they might be making an offensive coordinator change because Sarkisian just doesn't fit what they want to do. He can be a good offensive coordinator if you put him in the right structure, but that's not the way the Falcons' offense has been built. They need to be more of a vertical passing team. They need to lean more heavily on Ryan in the passing game. So kudos for them for continuing to play hard, and that's why they should keep their staff together and keep things going, but they really need an offensive coordinator change there.
Casey, it seems like Andrew Luck had the Independence Day speech, but more curse words in it at halftime, according to reports, as the Colts charge back to win 28-27. Andrew Luck, what an incredible season this guy is having, led them to another victory coming from behind.
I tell you, he's one of the few players, you could argue he's the best quarterback in the league because he's one of the few players who you can have weaknesses in your offense, you can have weaknesses in your defense, and he does things that allows you to look past those weaknesses. He's kind of like Dan Marino was in his prime, where the Dolphins teams were never quite that good, or John Elway, and he could carry them to that. But the thing is, the Colts, their run block has been really good. Their defense is rangy, and their front seven is one of the best in the league. I mean, this is a very talented team. Their secondary is banged up, and they got some problems back there, but they've got a number of ways to win just besides luck. But kudos to him for what he did yesterday, because that team, to fire them up like he did, and Frank Reich, maybe Coach of the Year candidate, you had those elements together. It's a scary team if they get to the postseason.
Even though they didn't cover, there's some bettors who are upset, but the Browns get a decisive victory over the Bengals, 26-18. And the Browns, talk about a team that's made a bounce back from firing their coach. You know, how good do you think Baker Mayfield is going to get when he's made this much progress in just 1 year?
When they saw what he did in college, because I never understood why he didn't get quite as much credit in college as he deserved. I know he had a couple of controversial moments, but when you saw his play on the field, if you just kind of what happened in between the sidelines, he was that good of a player at Oklahoma. And you could tell he was going to be you put him in the right situation, which is where he's at with the Browns right now. With the coaching staff and that team, they need somebody to fire them up, and that's what he is. By the way, don't overlook what Cleveland can do next week. They've got the best pass block in the league the past 6 weeks. I think that they can give Mayfield a ton of time to throw, and even though they've got a tough road matchup with Baltimore, I think they can give Baltimore everything they want and then some next week.
That'll be interesting because the Ravens win, they're in. If they lose, Steelers still have a chance, so it'll be very interesting next week. Of course, the Steelers, if the Ravens win, the Steelers could still get in if the Titans and Colts tie. How bizarre is that, Casey?
It is. Well, because we got the ties this year, and the NFL had stated with a 15-minute overtime, because what they're finding is that teams might have 6-7 minute drives in overtime, and instead of giving both teams kind of an even chance to go score on things, they're finding they're getting tie games instead. I hope the NFL decides to go back to 15-minute overtimes, because tie games, just that old saying is like kissing your sister. It's just not a very pleasant experience. I think the NFL needs to think about how to eliminate ties that keeps happening.
Patriots win. They win the AFC East again for the 10th straight year. But Casey, I think that there may be some flaws in this Patriots team. Are they going to be able to be exploited in the postseason? Because it looks like this defense is still a little slow. And outside of Edelman, it seems like the receiver position is still lacking.
I'll give you two big weaknesses for them. First is their run defense. For the past 8 weeks, they've allowed a 69% or higher good blocking rate in 6 games out of the last 8 games. That's a terribly high number. You never want to be above 50% in that metric. They're near 70. In fact, in 3 of those games, they were above 70%. Their run defense has been atrocious. Yesterday, Tom Brady only attempted 2 vertical passes. It's the lowest vertical pass attempt total he's had dating back to 2006 when ESPN Stats Information's database goes back to. So you're talking the last 13 seasons, he's never thrown as few vertical passes as he did yesterday. If they don't have a run defense and they don't have a vertical passing game, they'll be out of the playoffs in a hurry.
Aaron Rodgers said he wanted to play. Well, boy, did he play, Casey. Rodgers is the only player now in NFL history with at least 400 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns. And by the way, it's the second time he's done it in his career. And he did it with a messed up groin. that Jets team, they seemed like they had no answers for Rodgers.
He is an absolute phenom. It's almost criminal what's happened to him over the years, and that the Packers, he's had success there, but I talked about Luck and how what he did for the Colts was sometimes that the Colts would think we don't need to build as good of a team as we do around him because he could erase some of the problems that they had and they could take some chances. Kind of the same thing in Green Bay. We don't need to be more creative with our offense. We don't need to do certain things. We don't need to go out and get free agents. Hey, we got Aaron Rodgers. He can win Super Bowls for us. I hope when they bring in the new coach, I hope that they decide to go all out and say, maybe we got 2 or 3 years of a Super Bowl window with this guy. Let's get the best team around him that we can, because you're looking at a phenom who, if he could do this against the Jets in this situation, just imagine if he could be a good team.
Ugly game in Miami yesterday. Jaguars just happened to get enough points to win. Leonard Fournette got a rushing touchdown. They knocked out Kessler. Bortles played a little bit. Dolphins offense could only muster 7 points. I mean, what is going on with these two Florida teams, Casey? It's ridiculous.
With the Jaguars, it's that they didn't have as much talent as they thought they did, and they captured lightning in the bottle in part because of a really favorable schedule last year. So when that favorable schedule, suddenly they don't have quite a favorable schedule, that really caught up to them this year. The Dolphins have never been as talented a team as their record has indicated. There have been times I've said that Gase should be a Coach of the Year candidate, but then you lay an egg like this, and then it's like, okay, now he didn't get the team to play above its talent level. And you don't want your coach to have to get your team to play above its talent level. And Miami's in the bottom third of the league talent-wise, so they need some big talent upgrades, because right now they've been getting by without talent, and you can only do that for so long.
Unstoppable force, immovable object. Bears win 14-9 in a bizarre game. You had two young quarterbacks who actually been putting up stats, and then in this game, both defenses decided to show up, and now Matt Nagy is suggesting that they may sit some guys next week, Casey.
Probably should, because to be healthy, the coaches who say they don't want to sit players and things, I never quite understand that. You don't want to maybe sit them entirely, but you lose your momentum. But to play for a full game and such, I'm not sure that's always the best case, especially when you've got a team that could be only an injury or two away from some problems. But I got to give the Bears credit, because Mullins had come into that contest the previous 3 games. He talked on weeks 13, 14, 15. Mullins led the league in passing yards and yards per attempt. It wasn't just a lot of passes. He was actually doing very well on a per attempt basis. The Bears shut him down. So I think Mullins will still get better down the line. I wouldn't be surprised if he competes at Garoppolo for the starting job next year. But kudos to the Bears, because they show them they can stop anybody.
Bears will be watching the Rams. They still have a chance. The Bears do it, the number 2 seed, but the Rams did win last week 31-9 without Todd Gurley. C.J. Anderson, you said it last week, Casey, when I heard you with Mike Gill on Friday. You said, and you told me off the air, and you said it on the air, C.J. Anderson, watch out for that guy, and boy, did he have a game.
You give him a good offensive line and tell him just go north and south. That's what C.J. Anderson can do. I mean, Anderson, just remember a couple of years ago when he, towards the end of the season, had some fantastic numbers with Denver, because he was in type of offense that would do that. He may do it this week. They've said Gurley could sit this week. And if if you think Gurley could get healthy for the playoffs, and you can go ahead and get C.J. Anderson and get 160+ yards like he did yesterday, if I'm the Rams, why bother sitting him if you think Gurley needs one more week? But can you imagine if they had a 1-2 punch in the playoffs like that, to say, okay, we've always leaned on Gurley, but now maybe we don't have to give Gurley 30 touches. Maybe we give him 20, 25 touches and give Anderson 10 touches. I mean, that's something that's scary for a defense to think their run game could get even better.
Steelers lose another game. Now they're on the outside looking in, hoping for other things to happen as they go to New Orleans and lose to the Saints in a very close game. Casey, I asked the question earlier and ask you now, who's more at fault for the struggles this season, Ben Roethlisberger or Mike Tomlin?
Mike Tomlin, hands down. Ben Roethlisberger, he goes to Oakland, was 22 of 25 for 298 yards and 2 touchdowns. He played only half the game, and they wouldn't let him in the other half of the game because of for whatever reason, they wouldn't let him back in the game. Point is that he had a fantastic game, and Tomlin screwed up that game. And Tomlin, what you're calling a fake punt? Your defense was doing a pretty good job, and you're calling a fake punt in that situation? Look, if it works, he's a genius. If it doesn't work, he's not a genius. So I've said for a while that I think that the Steelers team is starting finally after 10 years. There's an old saying that coaches will tend to lose their players after about 10 years. I think that's where he is, where the Steelers players are starting to tune him out just a little bit. And if that's the case, then you got to make a coaching change. And I think that's might be where the Steelers are. If they don't happen to get the win next week and Baltimore gets upset and they make the playoffs, I think it might be time to go.
Seahawks with a huge win at home. It seems like this team is one of the best teams in the NFL. As long as they're at home, when they got the 12s behind them, they win 38-31. And Pete Carroll today gets a contract extension. Is Pete Carroll in your conversation for one of the nominees for Coach of the Year?
He is, because he realized that the type of pass-heavy team that they were starting to become the past couple years wasn't what he wanted the team to be. It wasn't what they built the team to be. This is a team that shouldn't be a pass-heavy team. Russell Wilson can do it, but he works a whole lot better if you give him a really strong ground game and can let his talents do other things. Because earlier this year, they were even to the point to where anytime they would do read option plays, you knew Wilson wasn't getting the ball, because that's how run-heavy they wanted to be, and they wanted to save some wear and tear on him, because he's not the biggest guy in the world quarterback-wise. So I think that him realizing that's what he needed to do with his team, it's a big benefit for him. It says a lot for him. It says a lot why they're giving him the contract extension. Yeah, if I were naming a top 5 coach of the year, he's definitely on the list, maybe even top 3.
KC Joyner joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS. Casey, no disrespect to the Broncos and the Raiders, but I don't think we need to preview that game. But I do have one final question before I let you go, and it's about my co-host here. So Deshaun, to me, committed a crime in fantasy football. Him and I are playing each other in the championship game of our 97.3 ESPN league, and he didn't even put anybody in one of his running back slots.
First of all, before we even get there, Todd Gurley is my running back that had to be taken out because he was announced out like 20 minutes before the game. And unfortunately for me, I couldn't sub anyone in because everyone else was already playing.
Casey?
You got to prepare for that. I didn't even have Gurley on my team, and I picked up C.J. Anderson on Friday. That had him on the team. In fact, he's in the league with Field Yates from our ESPN Fantasy League, and he had Gurley, and he wasn't able to pick up Anderson because I had him sitting on my bench because I had Kamara and McCaffrey. But yeah, hey, look, you got to be thinking ahead that might happen, because there was word late in the week that he might have not been able to play the game. So I expect the Gurley fantasy owner to pick up Anderson if he was available, because you should be planning for this sort of thing just in case it happens.
This is true, but it's Josh, so I had a lot of confidence.
Oh, you had confidence in what? I was going to lose.
Yeah.
I got Casey Joyner in my ear twice a week. You think I was going to lose?
Well, I mean, Casey is amazing, but you are still you.
I agree.
Casey Joyner joined us on the Boardwalk on Hotline. Casey, we'll catch up with you on Friday. Have a Merry Christmas and safe travels.
Merry Christmas, Casey.
Appreciate it, man.